Every year, tens of millions of shareholders get a vote. Not a suggestion, not a survey, an actual, formal, on-the-record vote on whether the company's top executive got paid the right amount. And every year, in something like 9 out of every 10 cases, the answer comes back yes. Footnote 1. That should mean something. A vote that lopsided usually means either broad agreement, or a vote that doesn't actually decide anything. Here's the thing, this one is both. Shareholders really can vote no. And when they do, nothing happens. The vote is advisory, non-binding, a formal expression of opinion with no mechanism attached to it. It has existed in this form since 2011. And in the 15 years since, the number this vote is supposedly restraining has done the opposite of what a restraint is supposed to do. This episode is about that number, the machine that produces it, and the specific year 2 well-intentioned reforms tried to cap it, and instead taught it how to grow. Here is what executive compensation technically, mechanically is. A package with several separate pieces, only one of which is a number most people would recognize as a salary. Base salary, the fixed cash amount, is today the smallest slice of a typical large company CEO's pay. The rest is bonus and increasingly equity, stock options, restricted stock units, performance shares that vest only if certain targets are hit. As this series has already established, more than 80% of C-suite compensation is now equity-based. Footnote 2. That single fact is the hinge this whole episode swings on, so hold on to it. Here is what it is not. The product of a negotiation between two parties with opposing interests, the way your salary negotiation technically is. It is closer to the opposite. A negotiation where the party setting the price and the party receiving it are functionally on the same side of the table. That wasn't always obvious and it wasn't always public. Two things changed that, both in the same 18-month window, both aimed at reducing executive pay, both from the same political moment. In 1992, the SEC overhauled proxy disclosure rules, requiring companies to lay out, in specific tables in plain proxy statements anyone could read, exactly what their top 5 executives made. Footnote 3. The following year, Congress passed the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993, which added Section 162M, to the tax code. Compensation above $1 million a year would no longer be tax deductible for a company, unless, and this is the part that matters, it counted as performance-based. Footnote 4, stock options qualified automatically. Sunlight was supposed to shame companies into paying less. A tax penalty was supposed to make paying more expensive. Instead, disclosure gave every company's compensation committee a menu of exactly what every other company was paying, and the performance-based exception routed pay straight into the one vehicle explicitly carved out from the cap. Boards hire compensation consultants to build peer groups, a curated list of comparable companies, and set pay at or above the peer group median, because no board wants to tell its own CEO the company thinks he's below average. Footnote 5. Researchers have a name for what happens when every single company tries to pay above the median of a group that includes itself. They call it the Lake Wobegon effect, after the fictional town where all the children are above average. Footnote 6. Do that in every boardroom in America simultaneously every year and the median itself becomes a treadmill, it moves every time everyone tries to clear it. Here is what a compensation peer group is not: an arm's-length transaction. It is a mirror standing next to a slightly taller mirror. Let's put a number on what before looked like. In 1965, the average large company CEO made about 20 times what a typical worker made. Footnote 7. By 1978, that ratio had climbed to roughly 30 to 1. By 1989, 59 to 1. By 1995, 2 years after Section 162M, was supposed to rein things in, 123 to 1. Footnote 8. CEO pay peaked in 2000 during the dot-com stock option boom, at an average of $20.7 million in today's dollars, 376 times the median worker's pay. Footnote 9. As of the most recent data this series has already cited, the ratio for 2024 sits at 285 to 1. Footnote 10. That's the contrasting pair. A law explicitly designed to cap pay at $1 million, passed the same year disclosure was supposed to shame it downward, followed by a compensation ratio that has never again touched the level it was at before either reform existed. The human scale version. Take a company with a $60,000 median employee salary, a realistic, unremarkable figure. At the 1965 ratio, its CEO makes $1.2 million. At today's 285 to 1 ratio, that same CEO makes $17.1 million, or roughly $46,850 a day, including weekends, before he's done anything a board could point to as performance in any given year. And companies don't just quietly exceed the $1 million cap, they pay the tax penalty to do it, on purpose at scale. Between 2005 and 2013 alone, publicly traded U.S. companies collectively forfeited over $22.5 billion in tax deductions by paying executives more than the deductible limit. Footnote 11. That is not a loophole being exploited reluctantly. That is a company doing the math, and deciding the penalty is cheaper than the alternative of paying the executive less. So, bottom line, this is why it will probably always stay this way. 4 fixes have been tried. None of them touched the number. Say on pay, the Dodd-Frank mandated advisory vote this episode opened on, arrived in 2011 and does exactly what advisory means. Shareholders speak, boards listen politely, nothing is required to change. Footnote 12. CEO pay ratio disclosure, a separate Dodd-Frank provision, delayed from 2010 until it finally took effect for 2017 fiscal year reporting, requires companies to publish the number but nothing else. Footnote 13. Legal researchers have described it bluntly as disclosure without context. The rule requires a single figure, no explanation, no benchmark for what a reasonable ratio would even be. Footnote 14. Portland, Oregon tried a sharper tool in 2016. A municipal tax penalty on companies whose CEO pay ratio exceeds 100 to 1. It generates modest revenue for one city and has not been meaningfully replicated at scale. Footnote 15. And post-Enron board independence rules were supposed to put genuinely disinterested directors in charge of setting pay, except independent directors still hire compensation consultants, still build peer groups, and still face the same Lake Wobegon incentive every other board faces. Every door has a locked room behind it, and this series has already shown you both the lock and the key. This isn't a new incumbent interest. It's the two this series has already spent an episode each on, meeting in the same room. Roughly $4 and $5 of executive pay is tied to the stock price. Footnote 2. The stock price is the exact lever this series showed you one episode ago, that buybacks exist to move. Footnote 16. And the votes that authorize those buybacks, along with the advisory votes on the pay packages they inflate, are cast overwhelmingly by the concentrated passive fund voting block this series covered 2 episodes ago. Footnote 17. The compensation committee sets pay pegged to a metric the company can manufacture, and the shareholders' position to object are structurally the least likely to. In 1977, a management thinker most executives of the era genuinely respected put a number on this. Peter Drucker, the man who essentially invented the modern discipline of management consulting, argued publicly that a company should not let its CEO earn more than 25 times what its typical worker made. By a 1998 interview, he tightened that ceiling further, telling an interviewer flatly that a 20 to 1 salary ratio is the limit. Footnote 18. A company can cross before resentment and collapsing morale start to cost it more than the extra pay was worth. In 2011, the Drucker Institute, founded in his name, wrote formally to the SEC citing his own words, in support of exactly the pay ratio disclosure rule this episode just walked through. Footnote 19. Drucker wasn't a labor activist. He was, by reputation, management's own favorite theorist, and even he thought 20 to 1 was the outer edge of sustainable. The ratio in 1965, the year before his first warnings, happened to sit almost exactly there. Today's ratio is more than 14 times higher than the ceiling he described as the limit. The design layer here isn't one document the way Rule 10b-18 or the Friedman essay were. It's 2 well-documented, well-intentioned reforms, a disclosure rule meant to shame, a tax rule meant to cap, passed 18 months apart, in direct response to public anger over exactly this issue, that each independently built a piece of the machine they were trying to dismantle. And that raises the question this series has been circling since episode 1. If the fix built the machine, what would an actual fix have to look like? And is there any version of this system where the market's incentives and the workforce's interests ever point the same direction? The mechanism fits in one sentence. Pay the CEO in stock, tie the stock to a price the company can manufacture, and let the people who approve both the manufacturing and the pay be the same people who benefit when neither gets questioned. Executive pay didn't explode by accident, and it didn't explode despite the reforms. In two specific, dated, well-meaning decisions, it exploded partly because of them. That closes the loop. This series opened with the buyback machine and the index fund vote. What's left is the harder question: whether any of this is fixable from the inside, or whether the market was simply never built to ask.